How's that? Good. First of all, I really want to thank everybody for coming. And the biggest thing that I want to ask is that everybody just respect everybody. This is just an informational meeting. It's to put some things out there that people have raised concerns about with me and asked if we could have an informational meeting. We're not trying to sway anybody's mind. We're not trying to change anybody's opinion. We're just trying to put out there what some concerns have been raised to us and to me especially. Unfortunately, we were going to have 3 speakers and Liz Katie could not make it, which is unfortunate. For the folks that do not know who Liz Katie is, she is an Essex mom who was very concerned about what was being taught in her schools, and she went to the school board and asked if they had talked about what they were teaching and how it would be, and they said we don't really have to talk to anybody. We'll teach what we want, and if you don't like it, run against us. And she did, and she won. And she just had a pretty good understanding of what critical race theory was, and I can tell you that she would have done a better job than me, and so I'm taking her role, and I'll do my best. We also have Ben Morley. Ben is heading up fair education for OCSU, and Ben has some words to say as well. But I really do want, no matter where your opinion is or whoever's speaking, I want everybody to be heard. I want everybody to be able to say what they want to say, and we just need to have decency. We're not here to attack one another. We're here to be as a community, and if we disagree, let's just disagree respectfully. So the premise of this meeting was just about talking about how critical race has come into our school system and into our everyday life. And so I'd like to start out with a little bit of what I described with critical race theory. So what is critical race theory? Critical race, and I'll also say that before I start that the information I gathered, I went to a lot of different sources and I kind of put it all together and I tried to get the good and everything of where it's at. So it wasn't one source of where I did a lot of research and I pulled it all together. So what is critical race? Critical race is an academic discipline that claims that the United States was founded on racism, oppression, and white supremacy, and that these forces are still in the root of our society. It goes on to say, in order to liberate man, society must be fundamentally transformed through moral, economic, and political revolution. To the surprise of many people, this basic package of ideas has become part of the curriculum in some schools across the country. In California, elementary school forced third graders to deconstruct their racial and social identities, then rank themselves accordingly to their power and privilege. In Springfield, Missouri, a middle school forced teachers in a diversity training session to locate themselves on an oppression matrix. I haven't Googled that. The trainers told straight, white, English-speaking Christian males that they are members of the oppression class and that handouts warn of covert white supremacy. In New York City, a public school principal sent parents literature including tools for action and touting white traitors and advocated for full white abolition. In my own personal story, as a senator, we sat through a 2-hour class that was taught by Susanna Davis, which is the state of Vermont's equity and inclusion manager or director, and the head of the Vermont Human Rights Commission. And I really apologize. I've forgotten what her name was, and I ran out of time to research that down. And I could be wrong about what the role was, but it was very high up in the Human Rights Commission. But I will not forget what the message was. And we, for 2 hours, was delivered to us that we were racist, even if you didn't know you are. In practice, critical race theory in schools is a form of state-sanctioned racism. These lessons traffic in 3 key concepts: race essentialism, collective guilt, and racial superiority theory. First, the lessons primarily reduce individual students to the racial categories of white, black, or people of color, which are then loaded with value connotations. White students are labeled as oppressors, while black students are labeled oppressed. Next, this from work takes students to think that they bear responsibility for and are beneficiaries of historical crimes committed by individuals who share the same skin color. Consequently, they must atone for their white privilege. Finally, critical race theory ascribes a moral superiority to individuals based on their race. Whites are deemed inherently racist and oppressive because all white people play a part in perpetrating systematic racism. People of color are deemed by this theory to be oppressed and the target of racism. Now, I could go on about all of that, but I think these theories, I can go on about these theories because no matter what you read about critical race, it all boils down to the same thing. As I said, I took a pile of information. I went back and forth and back and forth. I started here and ended up here, and it had the same start and the same ending. People of color are oppressed. White people are racist, and the oppressed must demand an apology from their oppressors, which are white people. And the idea that we are racist and are powerless to know or do anything about it continues. While I was preparing for this, I received a note from a concerned parent that for anyone that wants to coach in the state of Vermont must take an implicit bias course. What is implicit bias? I Googled it so I could be somewhat accurate, and I looked at 4 or 5 different meetings. We have a bias when, rather than being neutral, we have a preference for or an aversion to a person or group of people. Thus, we use the term implicit bias to describe when we have attitudes toward people or associate stereotypes with them without our conscious knowledge. In their eyes, we're incapable of distinguishing between right or wrong. I mean, what we've taught is, as our parents have taught us, to respect all. No matter how we try to say that we aren't, we're racist. Anyone who knows me or has heard what I'm about to say, Vermonters don't care about the color of one's skin, or what God they pray to, or what sex they identify with, nor what they've done or haven't done, what they've made or haven't made, what they've gone or what they've done or gone, or what they're about to do, or what successes they've had, or what failures they've had. We only care about one thing. If you're a good person, you're in. And that's really how I feel that this community is, and how all the people that I've met throughout my life feel that Vermonters are. You are a good person until you've proven yourself otherwise, and it doesn't matter where you came from, what walk of life, what color, what anything. Either you're good or you're not. And that's how I've kind of lived my life. I've organized this meeting to do only one thing, and that is to make you aware of what is said to be being taught in our schools. We'll have some more information on that in a little bit, and we're going to let you folks make up your own decision as far as of that. In the time I started making people aware of our event, I've spoken to over 30 people who expressed their wishes to come, but were afraid of actually being fired from their jobs. Most of the people were from the school systems, unfortunately. Some were from the state, and some were from other companies, but we had actually 31 or 32. I meant to count the totals of them. I told them that I would protect their identities. I wouldn't share that with them. And I do see a few of those people here tonight, which is nice. But, the thought that you could come and express your opinion or want to learn more about something, and you actually have the fear of being fired from your job, that just isn't really how it should be. I mean, we should be able to come, as I said at the beginning, and be respectful to one another, and talk about our ideas and talk about our differences, and be able to work our way through that, and then at the end of the day, still show up at the same restaurant or church or wherever you want to be, and you've agreed to disagree. And I've heard and that's probably one of the reasons why I did this more, is that there are people that are really, really afraid to speak up for fear of retribution. I also firmly believe that we shouldn't be dividing our kids by color, and I feel that that's what critical race does. It takes one group and it divides them by color. There's a story that I think about all the time, and maybe you folks have saw it, and it's more of a picture. But there was two kids, and they had big grins, just ear to ear. One was a black kid, one was a white kid, and they were probably, I'm guessing, maybe in the 3rd or 4th grade, 2nd grade, 3rd, 4th grade. When you get to be 56 years old, anybody under 30 look like they're 10, so it's hard to know how old they were. But they were sitting there with big smiles on their face, and they had the same exact haircuts because they wanted to confuse their teacher, so their teacher didn't know which one was which. And that's really kind of how it ought to be. We ought to be able to be in that mindset, and I think of that story quite often. I don't believe that we should be teaching any of this in school. I believe the school should be educating our kids about what's happened in history and how we've evolved, the good and the bad. There's been terrible things that we've done as a country, as a nation. There's been terrible, terrible, terrible things, but the best thing that we could possibly do is never repeat them. Learn from them and move on. And we shouldn't try to erase them. If anything, we should talk about them more so that we do not end up being in that way ever again. I certainly would be. I certainly would be furious if any child of mine, or one of my friends' children, or anybody's children were to come home and to have said to their parents that they were that they wish that they weren't white, that they were embarrassed by their skin color. An innocent little human being that's being raised to love all, no matter the color of their skin, or what sex that they identify with, or what they like, and whether they participate in sports or not, or join the drama club or not, or play video games or read. They needn't be ashamed of anything. They should be the most precious thing that we're ever to raise ever in our lives, and that's truly how I feel. And so that's a little bit about what I have to say. I want to introduce Ben Morley, who has more to say, and after that we're going to have a question and answer session until everybody's happy. So, Ben Morley.
I was so happy to see faces that I recognized, greeting me at the door tonight. Definitely haven't reached out and talked to many of you for way too long. And I'm so glad you're still in our community because you're great people. So, I started an organization called Fair Education for OCSU. Our group is about connecting parents and teachers together to improve transparency and offer equality and diversity of opinion for solving some of these issues we're here to talk about today. I was actually kind of happy, because me and Russ both said we'd have 10 minutes and we're going to open up for Q&A. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. I started this group because I was concerned when I saw that OCSU contracted with what appears to be a political activist group. We talked about this with different teachers who had no idea that this was happening. The activist group offers a program called Affinity Spaces in schools, which separates students based on their race, sex, and gender preference. And this is not, just for our area. This is happening all over the United States in different districts that are trying to prioritize this type of education and tackle what they call racial stress. And it's leading to a lot of lawsuits and abuse in different areas. I looked at the Building Fearless Futures website, and this is what I read. I'm going to read from their website.
That's the advocacy.
Yes. And they're being introduced, and they're actually sitting on the equity committee right now in our school. White supremacy culture. We recognize that white supremacy culture separates Euro-American folks from history and our own ethnicities, grooming us to be insecure and insensitive. Cultural, societal obsession with whiteness makes the experience of folks of color invisible, while endangering our own bodies and spirits. They say that they work to create and facilitate spaces that encourage deeper consideration of ourselves, each other, our history, and current predicament. We strive to respect, support, and empower every person, meeting them right where they're at, understanding that none of them picked their social location and none of them was around to build hundreds of years of oppression and oppressive conditions that have led to this point. In schools, students of color are harmed daily with interpersonal microaggressions and non-representation in curriculum and school staff. So we connect these students with mentors of color, resources, and students in other schools. White-skinned privileged students are harmed by a lack of diversity in school curriculum. Historical narratives and school staff as well. White-skinned privileged students also frequently harm folks of color directly. So we connect these students with white ally accomplices, mentors to help work through challenging conversations, models of accountability, and resources and more representation of historical narratives. So we actually asked, leadership there what their thoughts are about that, and they still said, this is not a political group, it's not an activist group. They basically just didn't acknowledge it. So OCSU is contracting with this group and other activist organizations like Safe Heart to organize and contribute to social justice reforms. However, it feels like it is beginning to create a politicized learning environment. They sit on our equity committee, and they are the primary consultants for social justice, their idea of social justice. Even though they hold no qualifications to work with children or any kind of vulnerable populations, they also appear to be working with other groups to network and build additional curriculum and co-teaching experiences with our equity committee. They're offering, the equity committee and them are working together to offer an education camp for teachers this summer. Understand that although the equity committee and these activist groups do not use the phrase critical race theory to describe what they're doing, much of what I have read in the equity committee meeting minutes and on the Building Fearless Future website does align with critical race theory ideology. And if you have not Googled Building Fearless Futures, I encourage you to do that and read more for yourself. Our concern is that they're bringing a political agenda to our school, to our public schools, to our classrooms, to our kids. And they're pushing their ideology on students and teachers to affirm their ideology. We trust our teachers with our children. I appreciate all the teachers at OCSU. We really appreciate you if you're in this audience today. And I think it's really terrible if you feel like you can't speak up about this. However, we cannot let disagreement with this theory and those who back this theory to overshadow the exceptional work that all our teachers are doing in this district. They're fantastic teachers. We are for equality and we're for diversity trainings, but we do not want politics to poison our school classrooms, and we will speak out for our own beliefs on social justice without a doubt. There's more I would like to share with you, and if you're interested, please join our group for Education for OCSU. We have a Facebook, webpage, and we'd be happy to have any of you join us. Like I said, we support ethical diversity trainings. I got my master's degree in public administrative management, and one of the things I studied was ethical diversity trainings. I understand the difference, and they are valuable things to teach our kids. They're really great. They bring them together. They offer more equality and inclusion, but this is being masked as that. This is not that. It's not traditionally that. Thank you for your support, and please feel free to reach out, and it's great to see you all.
So with that, we'll just open the floor up to any questions that we could possibly answer, or any thoughts, or any comments, or anything that anybody would like to speak about. And don't be shy.
What's the name of your website?
Fair Education for OCSU. It's on Facebook. We have a page right now. Fair Education for OCSU.
And if you want it, if you'd like, you can sign up in the back with Deb, and we're going to give that list to Ben, and he'll reach out to you, and he'll send you that address, that website address.
You don't have Facebook. Oh, well, there's another, right? You don't have Facebook?
We actually started a committee, and we're trying to take some action steps and to work with like the equity committee and the school board to try to, I guess, show them some different approaches to education. So you're welcome to contact me and try to be part of that committee, or with any updates, or if you want to talk, I'm happy to talk to you about anything.
What exactly is this equity committee?
So, you want to take this one? Go ahead. Okay. So equity has sort of been introduced as a new concept for critical social justice theory. There's a lot of different things that you and I traditionally know, whether it's words or definitions. Equity, social justice, anti-racism, racism, they've redefined that in a lot of different ways and applied it to different parts of society and come up with different definitions for those. Institutional racism, systemic racism, and even more intersectionality. So this is kind of just another thing that they use to demonstrate a demand for this. So I think there's a lot of what we would call equity needed, because everyone's got a different situation in our community and in our schools. And they mainly talk about racial inequity. I come from the belief system that you're not unequal just because you're a different color. So.
But I mean, there's an equity committee.
There is an equity committee.
Decisions for schools?
Yeah, so there's an equity committee. There was an incident that happened, and you could say it was a racist incident, or you could say it was, an act of racism, or a negligent act from a student in the school that caused a large inflation of concern, and I think rightfully so. We don't want certain things like that to happen, but they kind of took that as an opportunity to create a committee as an offshoot of the OCSU middle school board to come up with solutions. And the problem is, I've sat on some of those equity committee meetings. There's no objectivity. There's no diversity of opinion. It's literally sort of like this one ideology that's pushing this and making the connections to solve all the problems. And they're not transparent. I mean, you can't really find them on your phone, but if you went on the website, on OCSU's website, you can see the equity page, and there you can find their minutes. If you haven't read them, I'd really urge you all to do that. It's very telling about the kind of work they want to do and what their belief systems are. Yeah.
I would like to say I'm a school board representative. I live in the town of Westmore. I represent Westmore on the elementary middle school board and the Lake Region High School Union Board, and also I'm a member of the Equity Committee. I would encourage members of the audience, and actually I would encourage you all too, if you talked about at the beginning that this is an info gathering session. It would be great to have a diverse group of people speaking and have some folks from the Equity Committee, administration of the OXU, I guess I would say, as representatives to answer questions like, what is the Equity Committee? I think, perhaps your definition of it was not as objective as I would hope. So I've been at those meetings. It has a longer history than just the recent incident that occurred, I believe, last summer. And I don't believe that the Building Fearless Futures group is the main influence of that committee. There are people that have different opinions or other ideas about how we can approach this in schools. I do have to say too, as far as the affinity groups and the allies that you mentioned.
I read that from their website, by the way.
Yes.
Just to remind you.
I believe if you perhaps were called the N-word in school as a student, which some of our students have been called, you might be grateful for an ally to process that with.
They're not mental health counselors.
A trusted.
Yeah, but they're not professional mental health counselors. They don't
I'm just
have.
saying that doesn't necessarily have to be a mental health counselor, but to have an ally.
I agree with you 100% on that. I think that would be a great thing, but I think equity committee is going about it the wrong way by introducing activist organizations to step in and solve that problem.
Agree to disagree.
Okay, it's fine.
Tricia.
What is the structure of this? So the school board can implement whatever programs they want and then force teachers to teach. Is that how this works?
I think the more it becomes socially acceptable, and I've been in the equity committee meetings, so you can kind of see how the social acceptance is there to do the work, as they call it, which is essentially just affirming everything that is critical race theory in an effort to solve social justice. The structure of this is the equity committee is an offshoot of the OCSU Middle School Board. They report out to the OCSU Middle School Board, and from what I can tell, the meetings I've been to, they're not transparent about what their goals are and what they're trying to achieve. They give a summary of just something that the school board would want to hear and agree to, and then it carries on from there. I think there's been an uptick since this has become a community, or the community has paid a lot of attention to this. People are, paying attention a little bit more to what they're doing, and I was actually surprised because I've had conversations with people from leadership at OCSU, and they promised they weren't doing certain things that they've actually come back on in the equity committee meeting minutes to say, okay, let's move this forward quickly. And I think that to some degree, because I just have asked simple questions when attending those meetings, and there's a lot of support because of the social aspect, but the people in this committee know that there's no diversity of opinion. Their goal is to push a narrative. And it's a political narrative. And I started my group in the hope that we can come to diversity of opinion and we can all sort of agree on the same solutions. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, do you know if the public is able to attend the school board meetings and the branch meetings?
Yes.
I wish they would more. I don't think they've been paying attention enough.
Yeah, we need involvement. As many people have come to this meeting, we need to have people. And I quite frankly, I think that the school boards have for been years have been asking for more people involvement, for more people to care. I mean, they go and they have a budget and they pass the budget. They'll pass whatever big budget there is, and there'll be 10 people there to pass that budget. But I think that there has been push over the years to ask for more people there. But when we're starting to go down a path that I feel that we're going down to, Tricia, it needs to be more people involved and more people asking the question.
Can I just say something about that too?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what the group I started is really about too, is bring more transparency. So instead of sort of being an activist group ourselves, we just want to offer transparency. I share the links of the school board meetings. I share the links of the equity committee meetings so people can join that too, and they can just become involved. It's a great place just to have a dialogue. That's what we're missing.
Yes, ma'am.
So Vicki Jetler, if you think about what happened to our middle schools, we were forced to merge, and our representatives were taken away You know, they're voted at large in a meeting, which means that, like, I mean, I'm from Irisburg, I could vote for any of your representatives from your town, and I might not know anyone. And so, when I spoke with the Department of Education, they actually said that there is a process that that our school board could undergo if we asked them to, where they could amend the merger agreement to return the representation for votes to the individual towns. I think that in a sense, that will at least give us all, whichever position, you know, I have my own opinions about things, but at least I would have a vested interest in who I voted for that school board, and know them personally because they're from the town. So if you really do care about having your voices heard, and if you really do care about representation, then you should really call your school board member, who doesn't necessarily be elected in the town. You can call them and ask them to start that amendment process.
And attend meetings. Attend them. Yes.
I sit on the school board. We actually do, where there is a representative from each town. Other people can vote that are in the district, but the person who represents the town has to come from.
Yes, I know that.
Okay.
Now, I also attended those meetings where I know that people voted for school board members, but they had no idea who they were because they weren't from the town.
Right. I just want everybody to understand they do have a representative though that is from
I
their
understand.
town. Yeah.
Chat.
A big part of the CRT is equality and equity. Can you give the audience a definition and an example of the difference between equality and equity?
Equality is that everybody has the same basic chance to have what everybody has. Equity is that some people may need more than that, and that they might, you know, at the expense of others, I believe, that they might be able to be raised above that. They might be able to be given preferential special treatment as far as to get to that level. Now, saying that, I mean, you know, that's why equity is such a hard word to defend against, because at first we all do recognize that there are people that, you know, listen, we're not all the same. We're at all different levels. We're all there. But when you take the general premise of equity and you apply it and you use it to browbeat down somebody else the way that it's being used, that in this case right here, white students are being unfairly, because they have white privilege, they're being unfairly have an advantage over the other ones, then there's something amiss, so that we must make something up over here to make up for that difference. And there's nothing wrong with equality. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be. I do have a problem with the word equity. It's a hard word to defend against because it sounds great, and that's why it's used. But it's basically taking somebody and giving them more of an advantage than this person over here because of their skin color, in this case right here. And I truly believe that's what's going on.
I actually just want to say something about that, because I'm for equity in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Financial equity. I'm for students that have single-parent households. Equity and offering them maybe like some mentorships from mental health professionals. I'm for that, but I think that there is something to the idea that the majority outnumbers the minority, and so in some situations a kid can be bullied for that. But they need to address that for each individual student. You don't need this radical culture shift. It doesn't happen frequently. It's not an everyday thing in our school system, as much as they'd like you to believe that. So I think that there is something to that, and there is some vulnerability to being a minority in like a majority white school district. So I can understand that. What really helps with this is ethical diversity, equality, and inclusion training, because it allows everybody to share their own experience. It makes it so that people aren't making assumptions for people just based on the color of their skin or their physical characteristics. It actually offers opportunity for students, if we were to do that, which I support, from a mental health counselor, to make that move. But as soon as the facilitator has a political bias associated with this, you can throw that right out the window, because they're take it as an opportunity to get everyone in the room to affirm what their belief system is about the problem and about each individual that's in the room. They'll categorize individuals, they'll subgroup individuals, and they'll say, this is what your situation is, accept it. That's so unethical and so immoral from someone who studied this trainings. It's the exact opposite of what's supposed to be happening to achieve equity and equality.
My issue is, as a person of color, is who's teaching my daughter about critical race theory?
Yeah,
There's not many people of color in Vermont, so who's going to teach her about critical race? So like you said, they're going to categorize it. She's half black, half white. So is she oppressed on one half and then white privilege on the other half? I mean, really, this is crazy. We need to teach kids from this little, treat everybody the same, no matter what their color of their skin is, and you take an x-ray, I take an x-ray, we're all the same. Teach them to love everybody for who they are, no matter if you're poor, rich, black, white, purple, who cares?
I have to tell you, I really have to tell you that I think that the reason you're seeing this trending so hard is because it's a financial opportunity for a lot of organizations and facilitators. The schools are paying a lot of money for this. They get grant funding for this from central office. It's a business right now. It's turning into a business. That's why you're seeing it explode the way it is. Because people who have learned about this in their college experience, like if they, were like a humanities major in college or a liberal arts student in college, and they've read, critical race theory texts, and there's a lot of them out now within the last 20 years, and they are using this as an opportunity to make some money, which is also scary.
We had with first hand back here. Go ahead. Right here, you. That's
I just wanted to share that I've been going to the Equity Committee for several years now, and I don't think the words critical race theory have ever come up. I think a lot of the things that you were sharing, Russ, I think actually, or you're Russ and you're Ben, I'm sorry, are things that the Equity Committee is really supporting around, helping kids get along, around helping kids understand each other, around helping kids have a more solid understanding about who they are. So I'm just sharing that. That's my experience. And, the Equity Committee has always been open to anybody. I mean, I'm a parent of a kid who went to Lake Region, and she graduated, but she's also a person of color. So, I had a particular connection to that committee because I was a little concerned about her, growing up in such a white community. But I have to say that, she went to Lake Region, so Lake Region was really, really supportive of all of the things that, that you're talking about, but yet you're saying that Lake Region, the district isn't supporting that. So I guess I'm a little confused about what you're saying.
I hear a lot of words that sound really good, but I'd like to know exactly what things were done to help them feel more comfortable.
I don't think any, I think, she had a pretty good, she had a pretty good go in school, my own daughter. She saw things happen to other kids sometimes. And I can just speak about Lake Region, and the kids who go to the teacher went to the principal who knows what he did, but he dealt with it, and people moved on, and they talked, the kids talked about it some, but then they were able to move on. But the incidents happened again and again, and I think that's one of the things that the Equity Committee has always been concerned about is these, these things that happen to kids of color, and not just kids of color. It's not just about kids of color. It's about kids who are. I think you spoke to it, Ben. You said that it's mostly about kids of color, but it's not just about kids of color.
I hear you saying the problem, but I don't hear you saying what.
Exactly what happened?
Yeah, what the equity committee is doing about it.
Let me think about how I can answer that. Mostly they work with the teachers, and there's a lot of teachers on the equity committee as well. And so that, that's what they do. And if there is an incident, then they talk about the incident. But that's not all, they all do. And I know now I'm getting really nervous. So.
Don't be nervous. We're just having a conversation.
But, there's a lot of educational things that they do for teachers. It doesn't mean that teachers have to go to these things at all,
Yeah, actually they do have to go.
Well, they don't have to go to all of them.
Well,
They
there
actually are required.
I just had one, and they have to go. I mean, it's just like the instance that I said earlier with all the coaches in Vermont. They have to go to the implicit bias training. If you don't go to implicit bias training, you will not be a coach in Vermont. That's just the way it is.
That's a Vermont thing. That doesn't come from the equity committee.
They do have to attend.
They have an implicit bias training on their equity page on the website.
Yes, sir.
We often had race discussions in my class last year that would basically just end in arguments anyway. How do you plan to change what's taught in the schools when the school had Black Lives Matter flags hanging and when teachers would start presentations with everyone's racist or everyone's biased?
Yeah. So, and I want to ask you, and it's Ben, right?
Yep.
I want to ask you, did that occur in your school? That's what you're talking about is that they had the Black Lives Matter flag, and then your teachers were starting out the day that you're racist and that you basically have to atone.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a kid in school here for anybody who wants to just.
There's two of them.
Yeah. So we have two more right here. So if anybody wants to disagree that isn't happening, we have some kids here in school, and bless you for having the courage to stand up, but it's happening. Then the way that we address that is that we have meetings like this, and we have great people like the three of you come here and speak up and let your voices be heard. I really do believe, and I am thankful for every day for the school systems that we have, not only in Vermont, but really for what we have right here. I think that I got the best education that I could possibly ever get. Right here and right here. I really do. And we have great vested people here. And I think that a lot of this is being taught at a point to where, I'm sorry ma'am, I'm going to respectfully disagree. They have to go and they have to teach. And if they're not, it goes back to the same people. And I swear to you, I do not make anything up. I've had better than 30 people that wanted to come here tonight and were just afraid of getting fired from their jobs. Because they tried to speak up, they have been warned, and they've told me they've been warned, that they cannot speak up and to not speak up. The way we do that is we have involvement just like this, and we have these meetings, and we keep on going until our voices are heard, and we are the ones that make the change. So thank you.
And it's getting, Ben, you're awesome. Thank you for speaking up. His shirt says, "No need to fear, Uncle Ben is here." That's awesome.
I'll defer to him first.
Okay, yes sir, go ahead.
So essentially critical race theory is supposed to make me feel ashamed for being born the way that I am.
Yeah, and where did you learn that?
Where did I learn that?
Yeah.
I've learned that from research.
Yeah, and is it taught to you in school? Have you been told that?
Somewhat. Like, it's starting to develop from what I can see.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Does your teacher ever have political discussions with you?
Yes.
And if he or she hears an opinion they don't like, what do? Do they limit the way you speak or ask you to leave?
Yes.
Okay. So this is another issue is, I think in theory it sounds really attractive, right? We've talked a lot about how attractive the language is and how they use it to sort of implement this. The problem is this started in law school where a law professor was teaching it as another way to view zoning laws, and the humanities have just taken this and made it their own, and it's kind of allowing, opening up this dialogue in classes like you're describing is allowing teachers to influence students with political ideology. That's the issue here. I don't care what a teacher's political ideology is outside the classroom. They could go to, wherever they want, and study wherever they want. It's how they treat our kids, right?
So there's been a lot of talk in different places about funding issues for schools that don't adopt critical race theory. Has OCSU experienced anything like that?
So I've talked to some board members. I can't really confirm this, but I think that's sort of on the cusp of being introduced by our curriculum director as a funding option and a buy-in for what they call social emotional learning. So we can, as a school district, we can pick and choose. Teachers can create lessons plans of different things they want to teach. And I'm not sure if Kristen LaFleur could tell us how that works. I don't quite know. But there's no doubt that this is coming from the top down. It's like a centralized move that's happening everywhere. It's not just here. But it takes a local pushback to prevent it because we have that kind of control over our system. So I think that if what they're trying to get the school system to buy into is broadening of social emotional learning. And it's through social emotional learning practices that this is implemented more and more and more. That and co-teaching with activist organizations like Building Fearless Futures and Safe Art.
Let me get some, yes, back here.
Where I resent is people not knowing anything about me, but because I'm white, say I'm automatically racist. They don't know I have 4 Asian grandchildren, but they think I'm racist. When I was on a committee in California, the schools automatically assigned whether you were a minority or not by your last name. So if you had an American last name, you were a minority. But if you had, say, a Mexican or a Spanish last name, but a white parent, you were automatically a minority. That's not the way to look at things. But they use those for the numbers. And I think it's terrible. Harvard is being sued because they're not considering Asians as a minority. Because Asians score high on the test. And so, no, they're not a minority. They don't get a special privilege for entering like other minorities do. So everybody should be the same, like you said. Treat everybody the same. And not have all these special things that make people look to race even more. And is more divisive than what we ever had before. But the more you focus on it. I mean, Martin Luther King Jr. is probably rolling over in his grave because this is not what he taught or wanted. He wanted everyone to be treated the same just by the content of their character.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, the fact that they're considering this and pushing this actually goes to show how democratic and socially accepting we are of new ideas. Because a lot of people are really motivated by this because it sounds really great. It brings social justice in and bring in more equity. But it's like, what's lurking in the background of this that's concerning? So it's not a problem that we're all socially accepting, but it leaves some vulnerability for that, like you're describing, people to come in and sort of abuse that.
Yes.
So I encourage everybody, anybody that's in the school system, really dig in and ask them what they're learning. Because Adam and I did that with our daughter, and it was eye-opening with Web of Voices, which is, I think, Safe Art. So they had the kids watch Disney movies, and then they dug into the Disney movies and why the Disney movies were wrong. And then they were like, well, Moana was made by a gay guy. So they put that in the kid's head. It doesn't matter. If the kid likes the movie, they like the movie.
Yeah,
so I would really dig in, and then they're starting to read a book that's called This Book Isn't Racist.
How was that?
I just want to say, I totally agree with her. People need to go to the school. You need to know what your kids are learning. You need to ask them. You absolutely need to ask your kids what they're learning.
I had one person in the conversations that did not attend, and they had the end of the day. They wanted to know, they went around and they asked everybody, well, what did you learn this year? What did you learn this year? And what did you learn this year? And one of the children said, I learned that Abraham Lincoln was a very racist guy. and then that he was just racist guy, and that he isn't all what they had said that he was, and he was just a plain racist. And I'm sorry, I can't agree with that.
He's the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
Going back to what
Go ahead. Yeah.
So if you haven't noticed, the school system's introducing, and not that it's a bad thing, but this concept of a 21st century education, which prepares kids to be technologically savvy, to be able to operate computers, to actually explore some different independence, exploration through the scope of social emotional learning. So some of these things are good. But we don't see their homework coming home at night. We don't hear about what they're doing on those computers, right? It's kind of it's not that transparent now that they're learning this way. So a lot of this social emotional learning, which is kind of sad, like the Castle curriculum, that is pretty broad for curriculum, that I've read about it a little bit. Most of that curriculum is just delivered to them on a computer. They might have a couple of round tables, but they're just taking assessments on a computer about different personal things that they shouldn't have to share with their teacher or the school system. So not that that's happening here right now, but that's happening in other places, and it's causing a lot of problems.
Yes, sir.
Just keep in mind, too, everything they do on a computer is tracked by somebody. So it becomes data. Right? And when it becomes data, it's easier to push that message. Whatever side it sways, it doesn't matter. It's data, and everything a child does on a computer at school or at home is tracked. And somebody is collecting that data.
Yes, sir. Right here.
Yes.
And then you after.
I must say, so in our school, we were reading a book called Stink. And essentially, from what I got from it was, it was basically like critical race theory, how whites have oppressed blacks for all of time.
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
You're pretty brave, if you don't mind answering.
Oh.
Do you focus a lot on written discussions about race in school currently?
Yes.
Do you focus on it all year long?
Yeah.
How often does it come up during the week?
Probably like 2-3 times a week.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So Ben or Russ, one of you could answer this, or point me in the direction maybe where it needs to go, but how did the board adopt this program from what you guys said were unlicensed individuals need to be speaking to adolescents or vulnerable adults, to then shift that program to licensed teachers to then deliver that to kids? How did that come about, or how does the board even go about making that happen? Because I also know a particular board member, he or she has basically said the same thing like what you guys are saying, is if they speak out against this, it's basically committing board suicide for them, and they're not speaking up about it. They don't want them.
You know more about that structure than I would.
So I guess what occurs is the network happens, right? And so the more the network grows, it's good bureaucracy, right? The more this network grows, the more it influences, and people come up with new ideas. They want to be innovative, and so they bring those ideas to our central office and they prove it. And that's basically that's the only thing that would say they can't do it is central office. So central office is pretty consistent in supporting all of this, I would say. But I would love someone from central office if they're here to talk about that.
Tricia, and then you.
I'd like to read something that I got screenshotted and sent from a student from CCD. They had a reading assignment of Layla Saad's Me and White Supremacy. And the content of the email from the professor reads as, for those of you who are black, brown, or indigenous, you are still required to read the book, but you need not respond the same way. You have more flexibility with how you choose to respond. You may simply post that you read the assignment and leave it at that. Full credit, no questions asked.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I just have a couple of things. Like one, I've sat on the school board for the elementary school for a year now. We do have the equity committee. They start off our meetings. and I'm not sure because I haven't been there that long, but from my understanding, a lot of this is actually coming from, we don't make decisions on what's being taught. The board has a lot more to do with the financial aspects of things, but we don't get to decide what's being taught. So I do encourage everybody to go to those equity committee meetings, because that's where you're going to have the most understanding and the most say. And this has brought a lot of information to my attention about finding out where some of this stuff is actually stemming from. Because as I said, a year is not a long time to sit on a board, nor during COVID has it been super easy to learn what my roles and responsibilities are as a board member. But what I'm hearing is a lot of questions that don't seem to be getting answered, even if they're getting implemented.
Along with Mr. Sean, the question he asked was committing board suicide or whatever. Liz Katie, again, who I wish was here tonight because I think you guys would have loved her. She's a very great speaker. She went to a meeting that we had in Essex about this, and immediately, and she was the one that ran on the board and won, and then she's raised concerns about the equities committees and the critical race, how it's being taught in school. And immediately when she came to the meeting, she was, they called a special meeting that they tried to get her fired off the board because she actually went to this meeting. They flooded that meeting with 110 people, and they never used to have one or two. They flooded that meeting with 110 people, and all of a sudden that wasn't an issue no more. The meeting ended in 10 minutes, it was done, and the problem went away. So, and then I will just say one other person, and I probably said it earlier, I apologize. I'm not as calm, cool, collected up here as I might appear. I mean, it does, you know. But he got the one young high schooler that worked at the Essex pool got fired for being at that meeting for expressing that. So, Beth.
Well, I often ask my teacher why the Black Lives Matter flags were bigger than the American flags that are in the school, and I never really got a straight answer. So why do you think that they fly those wings bigger than the American flag?
I think that it's politics, Ben. There's a lot of politics in the school, right? So teachers are empowered to share their political beliefs, and that hasn't always been the case. So we're kind of in a place right now where things are really political, and teachers are feeling empowered by this movement to share that kind of stuff in school. That's what.
Yes, ma'am.
I think what we've got, you young parents have got to start to learn is to you teach your kids what you've learned about history and what happened in the past. That way, nobody can indoctrinate your child because they believe their parents and what they're being told by their parents. So
I would have to disagree as a recent student because I would write a paper as a Republican and I would get a C, and using the same writing experience, the same writing skill, as a liberal, I would get an A. And so my parents raised me as a Republican, but I had to pretend I wasn't all through school, so that makes it more difficult for students if you're teaching them that Black Lives Matter shouldn't be taught in school.
I will tell you, these kids are told that their parents are wrong.
That's right. But that's what you've got to get them when they're small and start slowly with them.
But I have heard a teacher tell these kids when they stand up and say something, and they say, well, your parents are wrong.
Yeah, and then you come home and talk to your parents, and then you can prove to them you're not wrong because it is here and it is written down in black and white, and then that way they have something to fall back on.
You have to also understand too, and like as a school board member, I'm really glad you're here, and as like an equity committee member, I'm glad you're here, that this is leading to a politicized school environment where teachers and students are experiencing tremendous pressure because they're sort of abusing that position, right? Students will do the same thing if they align with the teacher's ideology. They'll try to, attack the student. I've seen it a couple times in my own child's class. So it needs to be removed, and the school board is really the group to do that.
Yes.
I will say it is about politics, like you were saying, Republican, Democrat. A good friend of mine's daughter went home and told her dad, because he's a Republican, that he was a bad person. Because she learned that in school.
George.
Yeah, I was just going to give another example. I have a son, he's a junior, he'll be a senior coming up. But when he was a freshman, the teacher gave them a paper to write, which is better, capitalism or communism? And out of 27 students, he was the only one who wrote in favor of capitalism. And he didn't tell me that year, he told me this last spring that they all knew that in that class, if they wrote in favor of communism throughout the whole year, they would get a better grade.
Okay, we're kind of going to wrap up. Anybody that doesn't have a question to ask, anybody who hasn't asked a question, I'd really like to ask a question.
I saw you raise your hand earlier, like to recap. Do you have anything you want to ask?
I have lots to say. You guys don't want to know. I was going to ask Russ on the legislative side if he had anything about funding being withheld from a school district that didn't accept CRT.
Oh boy, it's so hard this year because it was on Zoom and stuff like that. But I can tell you that it certainly is. It certainly is in every aspect. It really, really is. And like you, I could go on and on and on and on, but I won't. But yes.
Politicians.
Yeah. Anybody else? Tricia.
So for next steps for any concerned citizens, what do you recommend? Getting on school?
I recommend getting involved. Getting involved. Go to the school boards. And you don't have to go at 15 at a time. Pick different months. Go 5 at a time. I can guarantee you it will be 5 more than they ever had before. I can guarantee you that. So just get a committee together and get 5 to go. Okay, January is your month. February is your month. March is your month. But you got to get involved, folks. You got to get involved. If you don't make your voices heard, you need to get involved. And that's, yes, honey.
I'm sorry. I just want to say, I want to thank Russ and Ben here for putting this together, for standing up for our children. And I just want to give them a hand for coming here.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. If you ever have any questions, I'm their senator. Feel free to reach out to me anytime.